afternoon, and welcome to Jeff and the Rabbi. And a happy Lag Ba'omer yesterday.
Actually, yesterday, today is Lag Ba'omer. That's Lamed Daled. Today's really 34.
34 days. All right, but you know what?
Right.
This is videotape. People they can watch. They make like it was filmed yesterday, so it's good enough.
Next year on Lag Ba'omer, they could be watching this.
Then we could do it on Monday. Good point. Well, so here we are on Lag Ba'omer, day after Lag Ba'omer. And interesting topic. I get from Rabbi Freeman last night. It's an interesting topic, and it has to do with Lag Ba'omer. And it really goes into the areas of if a political party in power, the political party has a just cause, then how do they handle dissent? How do they handle disagreement? It's an interesting question, and you would think if judging by how they handle dissent really probably is how you can judge the cause, if it's a legitimate cause or not. So I'm thinking back since it's Lag Ba'omer, we think of the poor Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai.
Right.
The guy has a little bit of dissent with the Romans there, has some disagreement, says that they're unjust, says that they're wicked. By saying that, he gets a death sentence put against him, which probably says a lot about the Roman government at the time. So he goes into hiding for 12 years or maybe more in a cave, and that's what happens to him. So thinking a couple thousand years into the present, you start to think about what's going on today in society. In the last few years, I've noticed, and probably the first time in my lifetime, that really dissent is really not welcome anymore, in this country, and not just by the government, but the powers that are in charge, the people that are really kind of the new normal in society. There's a lot of problems out there. If you disagree with different issues, so far, no one's been sentenced to death, which I think is a good thing. But your business could be sentenced to death. A lot of things. You can be out of business. You could be socially outcasted from any situation that you're in, and that's happening out there. And it's a little scary. I mean, there's situations again where people's business has been closed, kicked out of school, kicked out of society, kicked out of politics. Not just because of your behavior goes against the norm, but even your thought, even sitting at home having discussions with your family, with your friends, now is so dangerous that you could be ostracized from society or lose your business. So I'm thinking maybe that means there might be an issue. Maybe these people out there there's in power that say they're doing it for the good of the people and they're doing it for the kindness and openness. Maybe it's not that good. If you have to be hated if you disagree with them, maybe there's a problem. Now me, a little bit different. Obviously you see me here. I have no issue with political correctness. I walk the line, straight down the line there, and I never have an issue with it. But for others who do have an issue with sometimes getting a little bit politically incorrect, I worry about them. It could be dangerous for those people. No names mentioned. Right. So I'm concerned.
Well, surprisingly enough,
yes.
I know you're going to be shocked when I say this, but the Talmud has the answer.
The Talmud. There's always an answer.
Never thought I'd come up with that one, did you?
That's new.
No. Yep.
That's new.
There we go again. So you mentioned Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai.
Yes.
So let me just tell you the setting of this because it's really interesting. You have the Romans. The Romans came to Israel. If you would interview a Roman, like the Roman governor, he's on, like on the Israel Today show,
right.
And they say, you're here, you conquered the country, why are you here? They say, well, we're here to bring all the benefits of Rome to the people. Right? And we've got a vigorous program here. We're putting up roads, marketplaces, building bridges, aqueducts, the whole bit.
Sounds good.
So we are great. As a matter of fact, look at all the other countries that we have conquered. We're only doing it for the people. We conquer the world so that the people can have the benefit of all of our Roman organization, technology, drive, and all the good stuff. Right? So Talmud says, and if you're a Roman, you're probably thinking like that. Now and then there's some dissenters. They have to be eliminated because they don't have enough brains to appreciate the roads and the bridges and all that. So if they get in the way, they must be eliminated.
Wow.
We really wouldn't like to do it if they would just play ball. We'd be glad to have them use the bridges, but since they don't seem to buy in, we're going to throw them off the bridges, right? So here's our story. And it's tied into Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Shimon ben Yochai, or Bar Yochai in Aramaic. So he died on the 33rd day of the Omer. That was yesterday. So we're kind of got him on our minds today. So the Shimon ben Yochai, Talmud tells us, was sitting with two other rabbis, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. And there was a fourth guy sitting there who was a little bit suspect. He was a recent convert to Judaism, and they didn't really trust him. Rabbi Yehuda opened the discussion as follows. He says, those Romans, they're great. They build bridges, they build roads, they build marketplaces. Isn't it wonderful what the Romans have brought to our society? Now, we have to presume that everyone realized that there's this other guy sitting there that, they were a little uncomfortable about. So this may have been for public consumption.
He was a little nervous then.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
So he makes a statement. Now, there's another guy there named Rabbi Yossi. He didn't say a word. See, he doesn't want to praise the Romans, but on the other hand, he doesn't want to speak against the Romans.
That could be an issue.
Then you got Shimon ben Yochai. Shimon ben Yochai says, I cannot stifle myself. Can't stifle myself. He says, bridges, they put up bridges so they could charge taxes. And bathhouses so they could adorn themselves. And marketplaces because they need someone to put their whores. Some place to do all their, filthy business.
Right.
That's what they have brought to Israel. They've brought prostitution and immorality and high taxes. That's what they brought to Israel. In other words, negative, negative, negative. He saw like everything Roman, bad. Get out, basically saying, get out of here, leave our country alone, let us live the way we wanted to live. Well, word got back to the Romans. I wonder how. The Romans said, Yehuda, he praised us. They had him elevated. They gave him a big position. Probably pulled down a nice government salary.
This does sound familiar.
Yossi didn't say good or bad. They sent him into exile. They made him move to a town called Sipori, like up in north on the Mediterranean. And Shimon ben Yochai, very simple. Death penalty. Right? Just condemned him to death. Just like that. Shimon ben Yochai, of course, on the run. Now, the fact that he had to run away. So there's one thing that we see about Shimon ben Yochai. Before we even get into the story, what happened with him, but the first thing that you see is that he was a truth speaker. He didn't have to say anything. No one was asking him to do anything. Really? It wasn't like he was selling himself out. Yossi just sat there, quiet. Shimon had to speak up. And there's a certain type of person. There's a certain type of person to whom truth means more than anything. I was just counseling a couple, and they're having some problems with her family. So I said to the husband, you don't understand. To her, relationships mean more than anything. To you, truth means more than anything. There's a problem here, right?
That's hard to work that one out.
And you think truth is really important. You can't imagine how someone would think that anything less than absolute truth is important. Well, guess what? Meet your wife. She thinks relationships are more important, and truth is not so important. So she's willing to be kind of untruthful because it's good for the family, and you can't handle it. Well, that's why you guys have a little bit of a problem here. You get not good justice. Right. Shimon was one of these truth guys. Truth, right. I cannot sit by and let someone tell a lie. The Romans need to be told off, and no one's going to suppress me. I'm going to speak up, and if I have to pay the price, I'll pay the price. And he did. So he had to run into exile and had to hide out. Ultimately ended up hiding out in a cave. The reason we tell this whole story is because it's really good for the Jewish people.
Worked out in the end.
Worked out really good for the Jewish people. Because he hung out in the cave. In the cave, miraculously, a carob tree grew right at the entrance to the cave, so you could eat carobs. Right. And a spring.
What's a carob?
A carob.
I'm not sure what a carob is.
Carob is go to a health food store.
They have carobs there?
Everything they have there is carob. That's all they have. Everything's made out of carob.
12 years of just eating carobs, so it sounds like that could be a problem.
Yeah, it's a problem. It's a problem. They have chocolate carob and carob this and carob pies and carob cake, carob vegetables, carob meat, carob everything.
Right.
So and there was a spring of water, so he had fresh water, and he had a carob tree. What else do you need in life? Nutrition.
What I'm looking for.
Carobs, very high nutrition. He ate carobs and he drank spring water, and he sat in this cave for all these years. And didn't have anything else. During this period of time, what did he do? So he studied the Torah. He was in there with his son. they achieved a very, very high level of religious experience.
That's had nothing to do with the Carobs.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Maybe they were fermenting some of the Carobs.
Smoked Carobs, right?
Drinking some of that Carob wine.
Right.
Could be.
Possible.
Could be,
Right.
You never know. He got revelation. He experienced like extremely high levels of insight that he gained. So much so that after a number of years, he heard a voice, and the voice said, Caesar is dead, and all the people that he was hunting have been released. So he thought, well, great, Caesar's dead. They're not looking for me anymore. And in truth, what had happened is that times had gotten better and they weren't persecuting the Jews so bad. So he came out, but he had a problem. You know what his problem was? He couldn't tolerate the world. This is an old problem of people that spend 12 years in a cave eating carob and water.
He was institutionalized.
Yeah, right.
That's what happened.
That's right. He couldn't live in the real world. What was his problem? His problem was that he saw everyone's wasting their time working for a living. So what are you going to work for a living for? Just hang out with God. He'll take care of you. I mean, look at me. He said, I lived in a cave for 12 years. God sent me the carob tree. He sent me the water. Carob tree, water, studied Torah with my son. Everything's cool. He saw people are spending there all day and all night working, planting, plowing. Couldn't tolerate it. He was so angry at the world that he literally was like zapping the world. Like he looked at things and they lit up in flames.
Oh, I didn't know that.
God said, get back in the cave. You're wrecking my world. I didn't bring you out here to wreck my world.
Went back to the cave.
Send him back to the cave for another year. After a year, God let him out. He said, listen, even people don't spend more than a year in hell. So you got to give me a break.
Right.
God let him out. God let him out. His son Shimon was still having a hard time. Elazar was still having a hard time with it. But Shimon had already made his peace. He said, you know what? They just don't get it. He was living in a world, he said, people just don't get it.
Right.
Ultimately, they saw a fellow running down the road. And the fellow was carrying myrtle branches. Myrtle's a nice, very sweet-smelling plant. It doesn't smell so sweet when you crunch up the leaves. It smells really good. And many people like to have them in their house for the Shabbos because it makes the house smell nice. Makes them feel good on the Shabbos. So they said to him, what are you doing with those myrtles? And he said, well, it's for the observance of the Sabbath. And Shimon said, now I got it. I got it. See, I didn't understand that these people could be wasting their lives. Why are they spending their lives working when you could just be getting into God?
Right.
He says, now I got it, though. That's what the Sabbath is all about. People who live in the world, they can't go God only for 7 days. They can go God only for 1 day. The other 6 days they got to work because they're just not up. They're not up there yet. But they basically get the idea. The idea is ultimately that God runs the world and God's taking care of them, and therefore 1 day a week they can go God only, and that's the Sabbath. The other 6 days they work. Okay, I understand it. But the interesting thing here is that he had this tremendous revelation, and of course the reason why one of the things we celebrate on the 33rd day of the Omers, years later he passed away. Before he passed away, he shared the secrets of everything that he had learned with his students. And those secrets were written down into a book which we today refer to as the Zohar, the light, because it filled the world up with light. And in it, he really tells how to understand God and to see God in this world and to unlock secrets of the Torah. And that's what he revealed to his students before he died. So that is the story of Shimon ben Yochai. But to bring us all the way back to the beginning,
right?
Aside from all of his great revelation, it all started because he was an absolute truth seeker.
And even if it had him going against,
even if it put him against society, against the powers that be, against the people who are in control, and they put his life on the line. He spoke up. He said what he believed. He said what's true. And it's like Yehuda. I don't know if Yehuda really believed that the Romans are so great, but Yehuda was willing to say what he said because he knew that it was going to get reported back, and why make trouble?
No, I get it.
And Shimon said, you know why you make trouble? Because it's true. Doesn't matter. You can't say a falsehood. You can't change the truth just because you don't want to get in trouble. You got to stand up for what you believe in. You got to speak up, and even if the powers don't like it, so be it.
That's a tough one. I get it. I understand it, but that doesn't always work out so well. I mean, it didn't look like it was going to work out so well for Bar Yochai either.
Right.
But,
you got to be prepared to spend 12 years in a cave if you're ready for that.
The whole Carob thing kind of scares me. I'm not really familiar with it, but that could be tough.
Stop by your local health food store and check it out. Yeah, Carob's galore over there, and spring water too.
The water, yeah, I get the water. Back then, water didn't have anything, Coca-Cola or anything like that, but the Carobs could be tough.
Right.
So the moral of the story is that you stick with the truth?
Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai's story is you stick with the truth. You speak up for the truth. You don't compromise yourself. And as a matter of fact, even sitting quietly while a falsehood is being told is not tolerable, because that's what Yossi did. Yossi just said, well, I'm not going to say anything. He knew they were recording him. Basically.
That's what. So, but again, if you look in society today, and not that I ever want to get political, and I don't want to go that way, but there's an issue with that. I mean, as I said, today it's not even your outward behavior, but I guess it is similar to the one that stay quiet. You have to be actively out there supporting the powers that be, because if you're not, you are going to suffer the consequences. Maybe not death yet,
right.
but there's other consequences you're going to suffer.
Yeah, the guy that stayed quiet. They got rid of him. No, they didn't kill him. They didn't put a death penalty on his head like Shimon ben Yochai, but they did exile him because they didn't want guys like that around. Yehuda, who spoke up on their behalf, he was elevated and he became the spokesman and all that type of stuff. He enjoyed the benefits of society.
We have a lot of Yehudas then in society.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It's a great. It's a great story. It's a great thing, but it's not always that easy to do in society to be able to stand up and for truth and justice.
And it's not so easy to take 12 years in a cave if you have to and live off of your carob and spring water. And it's not so easy to not be at peace with people who are not living absolute truth. You see, because when he came out, he couldn't believe it. If they would just have absolute faith in God, everything would be okay. Why are they working? He couldn't tolerate the untruth of it. It was such a waste. He couldn't tolerate it. And God said, you got to tolerate it. You got to tolerate it because it's the human condition. He sort of superseded the human condition.
So kind of both sides of it. Over here is too much of the human condition because, but over here didn't want any of the human condition, so they're kind of a little bit of compromise.
Right.
That's it. Did he basically create the whole Kabbalistic way of thinking?
Yes,
or was that before him?
So this Zohar, he didn't create it. But he tapped into it. And the book that was written based on his teachings is called the Zohar. And that's
have you tried to read that thing? Oh,
yeah.
I got past page 3. And it made absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. Maybe I need some more time in a cave or more Carobs, but I did not understand one word of it there.
Right. Well, to me, and I opened the book, it was so bright I could have to put on sunglasses.
That would be a problem, too.
Yeah, just shining away. But that's what we have, this great light. And he saw things, the insights about God and the nature of God in this world and his revelation that are, above and beyond. And had he not opened us up to that, we don't know if we ever would have even seen it. So therefore, this great man, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, who was willing to give it his all and to put out everything and to not compromise and to stand for truth and absolute truth only, he was rewarded by achieving great things.
I guess the ironic part of it, and that's this thinking that, he opened up and he was for ultimate truth. Wasn't it true that after that was kept secret? Most of his thoughts from the Zohar were kept secret, and it was not ready for normal people to be able to understand because they weren't able to handle it.
Right. It is true that it was written in such a way, and even if you read the book, if you take out the book and read it, I don't think that anyone who reads it is going to be blown away by any deep dark secrets.
Right.
There'll be a lot of things that you see I wouldn't have known that had he not said so. But I don't think anyone's going to feel like their skin tingling or anything like that. But it's written in somewhat of a code. You have to know how to crack the code.
But I thought back then they didn't want normal people to be able to crack that code.
Yeah, well, the history of that and how much they did or didn't want people to study it really took a change, because if you jump way forward to modern times.
Right.
In 1648 and 49, well, into the late 1600s and the early 1700s, there was a false messiah named Shabtai Tzvi.
I know about him, yeah.
And he manipulated a lot of this Kabbalistic teaching. As a reaction to him, it was adopted by many rabbis to really put this Kabbalistic stuff under wraps and only expose it to the initiated who could be trustworthy, because...
Like Madonna.
Right. So Shabtai Tzvi and all of his buddies, they just perverted it and turned it into all kinds of crazy stuff. And it is easy to pervert, because it's really hard for anyone to say right or wrong when you're dealing with those esoteric things. It's hard for anyone to put their finger on, like, where's the truth and not the truth. A lot of it is a tradition. And someone can easily get in and manipulate that and falsify it, bring out things that aren't really there. So in more modern times, in the early 1700s, they really put a big clamp down on the teaching of the Kabbalah. Then later on, about half a century later, starting about half a century later, mostly a century later, the Hasidic movement came along and sort of took it out of wraps and tried to, promote it and disseminate it much more.
But you still have to be like 40 before you're allowed to start.
Well, so they said no, you have to say, and that created a big tension in the community, because many people said that it should stay under wraps, and the Hasidic community said no, it should be disseminated to the people, and as much as they get, and it's inspirational to everybody, and so on and so forth. Other people were more worried about it being perverted, and they wanted to keep it under wraps, and that became a big issue in the community, a tension between different segments of the community.
Because I was all excited, because next year I could maybe start thinking about studying it, because they did the 40 thing, which was good.
Right. Since you're counting backwards, you'll be getting down to 40 next year.
No, I haven't started.
It's a great deal.
Which is a good idea, because, I want to become one of you enlightened people.
That's right.
Which will be good. That's an interesting story. The only other thing, I know it doesn't have to do with our original topic, why I think that people will probably wonder, why is it such a major, great celebration on Lag Ba'omer when we're celebrating when this poor guy died? I understand that he released, he talked about it, but it's his death, it's his yard site.
So Lag Ba'omer has two levels of celebration.
Right.
Number one is really a different story. There was a great rabbi named Rabbi Akiva. He was Rabbi Shimon's teacher.
Right.
Rabbi Akiva had 24,000 students, and they all died in a plague. And they all died during the period of time from after Pesach, which is 34 days ago, till Shavuos, which is another 15 days from now. So during this period of time, they died. However, the dying stopped on the 33rd day of the Omer.
Which is also a tough thing to celebrate when the dying stopped. I don't know.
Well, okay, but I guess if the dying stopped, the people are happy enough that the dying stopped. Right. So that's one thing. The other thing is Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai died on the 33rd day of the Omer. So those two things together make it a happy day. Before that, we've been in sort of a mourning period because we're mourning the loss of all these students. Right. So therefore, it's a very sad day. But from Shimon ben Yochai's perspective and from our perspective, we appreciate the exposure. We appreciate the position that the Kabbalistic teaching plays in our life and how it elevates us. It's sort of like the fire within, and it elevates and invigorates, and therefore it really could be traced back to its great disseminator, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, which he disseminated a lot on the day of his death. So it's a big day. Big day. Jewish people got a real present that day, And there's other days. Other days are much more common. They regularly repeat themselves, like Jeff's 40th birthday and Groundhog Day. Like both of them are
that's true.
They keep repeating themselves.
I haven't got to 40. It was the 39th that repeats itself. I haven't got to 40 yet, but next year when I start studying, well, maybe we'll have a special 40th anniversary show, so I can start studying Kabbalistic thought.
Right. And they'll just, see, just be me and Jeff will just be like glowing.
That could happen. That's possible that can. All right, so this is interesting. It's kind of a combination, purpose show here. One, you learn about the whole concept that if you find out that the dissent is greater than the cause, then maybe there's an issue with the cause, and maybe it's not so good of a cause to begin with. So
Right.
maybe, and in modern day life, we probably should be thinking about that. If you find out that, oh wow, look how enlightened these people are, they're for this and they're for that, but then you find out that one guy disagrees, they all pounce on him like wolves, then maybe there's a different reason.
You know what
for
I'm
that.
thinking? I'm thinking if the Roman bridges are so good, the bathhouses are so good, and the marketplaces are so good, then everyone will catch that.
Right, you don't
Everyone will
need
get
it.
it.
Right.
So if one guy says that they're bad,
who
what do you got
cares?
to worry about? Because everyone can realize they're good. Now, if he's telling the truth, though, that might be very sensitive.
You better quiet him real quick.
So if they're going after some guy, it kind of tells you something about he's telling the truth. I had, I had someone was trying to tell me that he's signed on. He's now part of an organization. He says in his industry, his organization is the gold standard. So I said, well, one thing I know is it's not the gold standard. Because when it is the gold standard, you don't have to tell people it's the gold
they pretty
standard. If
much
it's the
figured
gold
that one out
standard, everyone knows
themselves,
that. You don't have to go telling it's the gold standard.
It's a good point.
Right. So same thing. If you got bridges and marketplaces and roads and bathhouses and all that stuff
pretty
is
happy.
good, yeah, I'm okay with it. People will get it, they'll like it. I don't have to go up and put a bounty on the head of the guy that says it's bad.
I think that's probably the most important lesson of this whole concept here. Is people open your eyes a little bit. If you disagree and you're having dissent and they want to attack you real quick, then maybe you ought to think about the cause to begin with. That's number one.
Yeah.
And number two, like Baomer itself, it's another one. Not that there's not enough Jewish holidays. It's another one here, and this one.
Day 33.
Day 33. It's a big holiday.
Yep.
All right, good. All right, well, next week we'll probably have another quiet, calm, non-political discussion of any kind of topic that won't get me in any trouble. So we'll see you then.